Assalamu alaikum students. Today the topic of my lecture is what is clause and what are the different types of clauses. So what is clause? A clause is a group of words that includes a subject and a verb, and a clause may form part of a sentence or it may be a complete sentence in itself. There are various types of clauses. The first of all, I will discuss about independent clause. Independent clause conveys a complete thought and it can stand alone in a sentence. It contains a subject and conveys a complete thought, even having the smallest unit of grammar that is syntactically accurate. You can see this example. He plays. He plays. You can see that this is the shortest sentence, right? There is only one verb and one subject, he plays, but still this sentence is conveying a complete sense. Every sentence contains at least one main clause, and a main clause may form part of a compound sentence or a complex sentence, but it also makes a sense on its own, as in this example. I like apple, but my friends likes banana. This is a example of compound sentence because it comprises of two sentences. So I like apple is one clause and my friend likes banana is also a one clause, and both are independent clauses because both are conveying a full sense or meaning. I eat an apple in the morning. In this example, it is a complex sentence, and in complex sentence there is one independent clause and one dependent clause. Here in this example, in the morning is a dependent clause, and I eat an apple is an independent clause. Now, dependent clause. What is dependent clause? Dependent clause actually may contain a subject and a verb. However, they cannot stand alone independently and cannot convey a proper meaning. They must be joined with an independent clause to be grammatically incorrect in order to convey a complete thought. And a dependent clause is usually a supporting part of a sentence, and it cannot stand by itself as a meaningful proposition. So it has to be dependent on an independent clause in order to convey its meaning fully. In these examples, you can see you must work hard if you want to get success in life. This is the example of dependent clause. If you want to get success in life, it's not clear. The meaning of the sentence is not clear until we join this part of the sentence or independent clause with this dependent clause. So then only then it will make its meaning clear. So this is not a complete thought. If you want to get success in life, what will you get? We don't know. This idea must be joined with an independent clause to be grammatically correct. So the next type of clause is called conditional clause. Conditional clause is a type of clause that states a hypothesis or a condition, real or imagined, describing something about possibility or probability, and it usually begins with if and unless. You would have passed your exam if you had worked hard. I would have believed you if you hadn't lied to me before. You cannot achieve success unless you work hard. Now, in these examples, you can see if you had worked hard, if you hadn't lied to me before, and unless you work hard. Three of these examples are unable to convey a full meaning. So that's why they have to rely on the independent clauses in order to make its meaning clear, and hence if or unless have been used in order to impose the condition. The next type is called relative clause. A relative clause is one that is connected to a main clause by a relative pronoun such as which, that, whom, whose, when, where, or who. So these are called relative pronoun. And because these relative pronouns are used in these relative clauses, that's why they are called relative clauses, because they relate one clause to another clause. So that's why these are called relative clauses. You can see these examples. I bought a new car, it's very fast. These are example of two individual sentences, but hence we can join these two sentences in a single sentence by using any relative pronoun. So in this way we can join these two sentences by placing that in between them. I bought a new car that is very fast. Here is another example. It's a book, it should be read by everyone. It is a book that should be read by everyone. So these two sentences has been joined by a relative pronoun that. She has a son, he is a doctor. She has a son who is a doctor, or that is a doctor. We can use both to who and that in order to join these sentences. Next example is we have bought a house, it's newly built. We have bought a house that is newly built. So these are called relative clauses because relative pronouns are used in order to join the two sentences. Restrictive relative clause. A restrictive relative clause, also known as a defining relative clause, gives essential information about a noun that comes before it, and without this clause the sentence won't make much sense. A restrictive relative clause can be introduced by the relative pronouns that, which, whose, who, or whom. So restrictive relative clauses are also joined by relative pronouns. You should not place a comma in front of a restrictive relative clause. It has a limited function. For example, children are likely to be healthy who eat vegetables. Now you can see in this example that both the part of this clause are unable to convey a full meaning. And both these parts of this clause are unable to convey the meaning, and both are dependent on the other clause in order to convey its meaning. Children are likely to be healthy, it's one part of the sentence, it's a one clause, but still it's not conveying a proper sense. Children are likely to be healthy, we don't know who are the children who are likely to be healthy. Similarly, who eat vegetables, if we take this part of the sentence individually, it's not conveying a proper sense. So that's why these are called restrictive relative clauses, because one clause restricts the meaning of the other clause. So children who eat vegetables are likely to be healthy. So when we write both these clauses together, then only they will be able to convey their meaning in its fullest sense. Non-restrictive relative clause. A non-restrictive relative clause, also called a non-defining relative clause, provides extra information. that could be left out without affecting the meaning or structure of the sentence. Non-restrictive relative clauses are normally introduced by which, whose, who, or whom, but never by that. So these clauses introduced by which, whose, who, or whom, but never by that. So you should place a comma in front of them. For example, the paint which he brought at the hardware store was bright red. So actually the paint was bright red, right? It is a one clause, and which he brought at the hardware store is independent clause, and giving the extra information about this part of the sentence or this part of the clause. My neighbor who lives next door claims to be an artist. You can see if we remove this clause or relative clause from this part of the sentence, the meaning of the other sentence will not be affected at all. So this clause is only giving extra information. So, and in this way not restricting the meaning of the other clause, if we even separate this part of the sentence from the main clause. So that's why these are called non-restrictive relative clauses. Now there are other types of clauses, and in these types of clauses the very first clause is called noun clause, and a noun clause is an independent clause that acts as a noun. It begins with words such as how, that, what, whatever, when, where, whether, which, whichever, who, whoever, whom, whomever, and why. Noun clauses can act as a subjects, direct objects, indirect objects, or objects of a preposition. Now you can see certain examples about noun clause. I remember what you said yesterday. Here the underlined portion is the independent clause, I remember, that can stand alone. What you said yesterday serves as a dependent noun clause. The noun clause is acting as the object of the sentence, and in this noun clause you said is the a subject and a verb, and this creates a clause. However, what you said yesterday cannot stand alone and therefore must be paired with an independent clause. I thought what she wore was so stylish. Do you know what the weather will be? So these are the examples of noun clause. Now another type of clause is called adjective clause, and it is also called as a relative clause as well. An adjective clause is a type of dependent clause that acts as an adjective in the sentence. An adjective clause always contains a subject and a verb. However, it cannot stand alone as a complete thought, and it always begins with one of the following words: relative pronouns, that, where, who, whom, which, relative adverbs, when, where, why, and these are the examples of adjective clause. The boy whom you saw at the store committed a robbery. The boy committed a robbery, right? Whom you saw at the store. Here the boy committed a robbery is telling about the quality of a voice. That's why it is called adjective clause. I'm waiting for you. When will you come? Right? They are acting as an adjective in these sentences, and they contain a subject and a verb. However, they cannot stand alone as a complete thought. Now another type of clause is also called an adverbial clause, and it is a type of dependent clause that acts as an adverb in a sentence. An adverbial clause also contains a subject and a verb. However, it cannot stand alone as a complete thought. I was not at home when the guests arrived. When the guests arrived, when is indicating the time. This is the house where I live in. This example is indicating the place. So that's why these are called adverbial clauses. Thank you so much for watching.